10 years ago, Square Enix released Final Fantasy XIV as the second major MMORPG in its flagship franchise. Coming out just 9 months after Final Fantasy XIII, it opened to horrible reviews and intense fan backlash over nearly every aspect of the game. So massive was the negative reception, Square realized that they had committed huge errors and shut the game down late in 2012, taking most of 2013 to rebuild the entire game from the ground up. Re-released as Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn, it proved to be just the thing they needed, releasing to very positive reception, ultimately leading to 3 major expansions and a very active user base that continues to play it to this day. On today's episode, we'll take a dive into this redeemed title and find out why we've spent hundreds or even thousands of hours in it. It's Final Fantasy XIV next on Downloadable Content. Hello everyone, welcome to DLC. I am Brian, and with me we have Joshi.
I live.
You live! For the first time in 3 years, you're on an episode.
Hello there.
We have 2 newcomers to Downloadable Content. There first, we have Shan.
What? How did I get here? Sorry.
And we have Andrew.
Lally ho, nerds.
Oh, yes.
Excellent. We are also going to have Ron and Ronny. They're going to show up a little later. Ironically, they were the 2 that suggested this episode, but they're late to their own episode. So yes, I'm going to throw them right under the damn bus. Just to get it out of the way, because I'm going to let them have it. So... But yes, we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy XIV on this episode. It's 10 years ago it was released. But before we dive into what is probably going to be a lengthy and hilarious discussion, just want to remind everyone that every single episode of Downloadable Content can be found on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play Music, as well as our website, dlcpodcast.com. You can check out our upcoming episodes. You can give us feedback. You can give us ideas for future episodes. We would love to have them. So it's all there for you, dlcpodcast.com, and all the different ways to get downloadable content into your ears. Just make sure you wash your hands afterward, please. 20 seconds minimum. Oh. All right, gentlemen. So yeah, 10 years ago. It's like, this is one of those I feel old moments because I feel like Final Fantasy XIV just came out, but that's, given how long Square has put out major releases lately with, a 400-year development cycle, it only feels like that. I mean, Square's only put out, 3 games in the last 10? Didn't it just come out? But no,
that's the way it feels, seriously.
It does. Kingdom Hearts 3 was about 9 centuries in development. Final Fantasy 15 was this, and now Final Fantasy 14, which came out again, as I said in the intro, 9 months after Final Fantasy 13. I was kind of blindsided by it. I was so mad at Final Fantasy 13 and how much I hate this game that when Final Fantasy 14 came out 9 months later, I'm just like, wait, what?
It wasn't a good year for them.
Yeah, they kind of, yeah.
It's kind of a next-gen reality check, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was... And I was mad, not only because I just played a horrible Final Fantasy game in 13. Yes, I know some of you like it. I mean, you're entitled to your wrong opinion. I'll give you that. But, but I was not a fan when Square announced that Final Fantasy XI was a going to be online. So I'm like, oh, again, Square, you're doing this again. You're taking your main numbered series and making it an MMO again.
The choice to make the MMOs numbered parts of the franchise is a really weird thing. Like the fact that 11 hasn't closed down has sort of meant that it's still there, it's still playable, but at some point that's just going to be a hole that doesn't exist. And it's kind of why when the whole 14 disastrous launch happened, like a lot of the, like you see other games like Anthem and other failures that have happened in the industry, and a lot of them, like the companies just kind of sidle away from the game and just say, yeah, that didn't happen, let's move on. But Square had a real problem in that Final Fantasy XIV, both it affected the Final Fantasy reputation, but also if they just gave up on that MMO, there's just a giant hole in their franchise.
Yeah, and that you know, and because it's a numbered game too, it's like there's an expectation there. Like I feel like as fans of the Final Fantasy franchise, if it's a numbered title, this is a main entry, we have a lot of hopes and dreams and expectations on what we want a main entry to be. I feel that our expectations are a bit reduced when it's a spin-off or some other like lesser Final Fantasy title, but when it's a numbered title, there's a lot riding on it, I feel.
Crisis Core, why have you failed me? Sorry.
I'll give you a Kleenex there, Shan.
I also think they probably had a plan when they came out with 14, that they were counting on that income going into the years ahead, and they needed to stick to that. So they didn't want it to be a sunk cost. They needed to fix it for their business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And like they claim that it was like you said in the intro, it was like a rebuild from the ground up. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Like they had to develop, was it 1 or 2 years they developed A Realm Reborn in? And in reality, and this is why the game is to this day in kind of a technical trouble spot, is they've just built the new game on top of the old game and like ripped and strung it around and put plasters over things. So there's like a lot of disaster under the hood because it's on that legacy code base.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't know that. Now, full disclosure, I have not played a single second of this game. I did not know that it was just kind of built on top of that sort of code, because I remember the backlash. I remember the horrible, horrible reaction it got, and I was one of those fans who was getting their righteous indignation up and going, "Ha! Serves you right, losers! You made an MMO, idiots!
How dare you make an MMO?
How dare you make an MMO?" Because, at the time, I did not really have much in the way of disposable income, so I'm looking forward to this main numbered game, and I'm going, oh, it's a monthly subscription. I cannot swing $15 a month, or however it was in 2012, or 2010 actually, because of like, oh, but student loans.
And it is a funny thing because the industry has definitely moved away from subscription-based games to like free-to-play stuff and loot boxes and other forms of ways of making money, and yet 14 is growing successfully on this old revenue concept.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept, because most of the industry's moved on. That's a very good point. And
well, there actually something funny about that is one of the reasons that they're growing, and I guess this is a foreshadowing for probably a later part of the discussion, is that they just wrangled in a bunch of people who are already used to paying $15 a month, who maybe got a little frustrated by the last game they were playing and decided to switch. Wonder what we're talking about.
No idea what game you're talking about.
Yeah, don't be so vague. I have no idea.
I guess one thing that would be probably a good starting point would be to talk about what the backlash to the original game actually was.
Yes.
So the original game is referred to as 1.0 in the community, and the expansions are 2.0, etc. And 1.0 was basically developed by the Final Fantasy XI team, and 11 was it was a successful game. It made them a load of money, but like I think 500,000 players was where it capped out. And basically, in their very Japanese developer ways, they went, well, we made a successful MMO, we can make another successful MMO, but take the Final Fantasy XIII engine and make it look pretty. And they basically completely ignored the elephant in the room, which was WoW. Didn't look at all the learnings, all the things people had come accustomed to, and built a game nobody wanted to play.
Well, like, do you guys remember a lot of it was in the reporting regarding, like, 10-hour boss fights, 5-hour boss fights, things like that. Like, some of that was 11, but some of that was also 14. And it was, like, people were just immediately turned off by being like, I'm going to have to spend how much time in a raid? No.
Yeah, that was kind of based on an old model that was already falling to the wayside with all these newer, faster-paced things. And I don't...
Go ahead.
They had other quality issues as well. That was, I think, a lot of it was outsourced to a different studio, and that came through with the horse birds. Chocobos were originally called horse birds.
Yeah, I mean, bugs and incomplete content was the other major issue. So like the performance of the game was horrendous because, as I said, they used I think they originally built it on the 13 engine, and they had like more polygons in a barrel than they had in a character. And then incomplete content, the 1.0, you could never ride a chocobo. That a staple of the fucking franchise, and you couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I'm reading up on this. Like, now, how many of or did all of you did you play the original release?
No, I've never played it.
I did not, because I heard it was so terrible.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't play it, is because at the time I was riding the WoW Dragon, and yeah, I looked over and was like, what the hell no. Just
Ronny,
I mean, it almost immediately had the worst press in the world to just kill it at the start.
I think we have a Ronny now.
We do. Are we currently recording?
We've been recording now for the last 15 minutes.
Okay.
So you haven't missed too much. We're talking about the original game, the original release of Final Fantasy XIV, and why the hell it failed miserably. And I just asked the group if any of them had played the original 14 before it shut down and became A Realm Reborn.
Not regularly. I did the trial of it, so I did play a little bit of it. But also, once I got super into 14, I started reading a lot on the original, because I'm that kind of person where I'm like, so.
You're a lore nerd. There's no shame in that.
Absolutely, I am, and I love the concept of we ended the world, and now this is a couple of years later, and we're gonna I love that whole concept. But yeah, the first one was a dumpster fire.
I guess I would recommend for anybody interested in doing that kind of research, there are two very good YouTube series. One is by No Clip, which is a documentary channel, and the other is the Speakers Network have a series called The Rise and Fall of 14.
Yep.
The great thing about the No Clip one gets to talk to the developers and get their side of the story, while the Speakers Network one is much more from a player's perspective of what was wrong with the game.
Well, it didn't have dungeons to begin with. Like, that's a pretty basic thing for an MMO.
So, as a note, anyone who is wonderfully like, well, maybe if they could touch up 1.0 and re-release it for people who may have liked 1.0, the current director, Yoshi P, has said one word answer. Well, he actually did give an actual worded answer in English, actually. He just said the word nightmare and laughed hysterically.
Yeah, I was about to say,
no.
He started off just laughing.
Yeah.
Because I saw that interview.
It was a bad, incomprehensible, buggy game. Like, this isn't a WoW classic situation. Nobody wants to play it.
No. At most, some people want to see pieces of the story, and how they've done little flashback parts that you can play from Shadowbringers, which we'll get to much later. But I'm kind of hoping maybe they'll do something like that with the classic stuff at some point, where like you can go back and play some of the more important story bits through doing like a flashback thing, but in the current engine. That would be cool, but yeah, nobody wants to go back to what 1.0 actually was.
So I guess this is an interesting point for people who haven't played the game, is when they quote remade the game, they actually didn't remake it. Well, I mean, they remade the world, but the game continued. They added an in-law reason for the decimation of 1.0 and why it was ending.
The fall of Dalamud.
And they just continued the story. So it makes it, that, as you said, there's a load of flashbacks and context and lore and history that makes it all make sense. But that game doesn't exist anymore, and you can't experience that part of the story.
Which is disappointing.
Although, I heard like a lot of it is bad. Like, yes, there are lore reasons you would want to go back, and I think they're handling that well. But in reality, the original quests were just incomprehensible.
Oh, absolutely. The only thing worthwhile was the main story, and there wasn't a whole lot of that, unlike in the current one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just from reading about all the how broken this game was, apparently, and because I'm not surprised, that the only good thing that came out of the original game was Nobuo Uematsu's score, because of course.
Yeah, I mean, the original soundtrack is really good, and to jump ahead a bit, the new composer Soken that they've got,
so good.
He is fucking incredible. It is even if you don't play this game, you should listen to the soundtracks, because they are just a masterpiece.
I'll screw up my gameplay while I'm playing if it's a new song I haven't heard before, because it's always so good.
By the way, he is also chicken nugget powered, if you believe any of these stories coming out of the op. And when I say he's chicken nugget powered, apparently in the creation of Shadowbringers, he pretty much like lived in his office and very often forgot to eat for like hours on end. So his staff would just go down to the like chicken. There's like a chicken thing in there on their first floor, and either he or they would just buy out the whole damn thing for the day, drag it upstairs, and just eat, so that he didn't like starve to death making this goddamn music. Like, it was fantastic. And you can see a picture, I gotta remember where the picture is. It's somewhere on the Final Fantasy site, but it's just of these chicken boxes along his wall, and it's like 5 feet tall. It's ridiculous.
He is, if you watch any like interview or like performance he's been in, like orchestra performances he's been in, he is the quintessential like crazy madman, but what he produces is incredible.
I will have to give it a listen, because I do enjoy video game soundtracks, and the fact that all of us here, all of you guys are sort of unanimous in saying, yeah, go listen to the music. I will very likely.
I'll definitely send you some top recommendations.
The other worthwhile thing that came out of the original 14 was it's a very pretty game. At least if you look at screenshots, far prettier than the than the rebooted version. But that's because it was so pretty that it basically couldn't run correctly, and the frame rate was absolute garbage because they decided that prettiness was more important than playability.
So they didn't obviously learn from Final Fantasy XIII.
They used the same engine.
I know they did.
I think they were basically developed side by side, and you can see the identical mistakes in both games.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it isn't just them making that decision. It's that the engine that they used, that they built for 14 and 13, really pushed you in certain directions that now we realize were problematic. So, but for the original 14 wasn't a complete failure, because if we didn't get the failure of the original 14, we wouldn't have gotten Aoki Yoshida fixing it and eventually leading to the new game.
Yeah, so as I said earlier, they had the Tanaka, the director of 11, building this original game, and when this all went to shit, they basically just parachuted a new guy in. It's like, this is your problem now, solve it.
Save us, please.
And Yoshida was known inside of the company as the guy behind Dragon Quest X, the successful Dragon Quest MMO.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
No, I don't know that.
Yeah. I try not to think of that because, again, that was another one where I love the Dragon Quest series, played 1 through 9, and then they announced, hey, 10 is going to be a Wii-only MMO. And I'm looking at my Game Informer going, what are you doing?
But it was very successful in Japan, and
great. I'd like to play it.
Yeah, they had a lot of confidence in Yoshida from that, and that's why they gave him 14 and went, please put this fire out.
And I mean, you can hear that some of this in like the No Clip documentary, and it sounds really boring for talking about a video game. But Yoshida just comes across as like a project management genius. The way you fix a development team is project management. It's really boring, but like you need that kind of person at the helm to get this kind of massive software development project going in the right direction.
Yeah, and from everything I've heard about the way Yoshi gets down, he's very, very much like, he's hands off until he needs to be hands on, and then he comes in like a tidal wave. Yeah. And so I could see people being like, you know what, I like having a certain amount of autonomy and just being able to do, my own thing. And I don't want my boss to have to then like suddenly turn on me with star anime eyes and like knock me out of my chair in order to get this working. It's also, I think Yoshi was a WoW player at one point, which is why
he definitely was.
Yeah, which is why you get a lot of the like, oh wait, yeah, this is dumb. Why are we doing it this way?
Well, it's like Final Fantasy XIV, the original, started development in 2005. So it had a 5-year development cycle, but just think of what the MMO landscape was like in 2005. And keep in mind, a lot of those design decisions made early on weren't changed as the landscape changed.
Yeah, I mean, almost deliberately to their detriment, they ignored the entire outside world. They didn't look at the market. They refused to acknowledge what American developers were doing.
Not even just the gaming not even just the landscape of games being produced. They also ignored all fan feedback for the original. They didn't even have a forum for people to give suggestions or bugs. They had no feedback for the original game.
And I mean, they even like backtracked on decisions that 11 fixed. Like, I think one of the perfect examples are like a very obvious staple of MMOs is an auction house system where you can go and buy things from other people.
But
the
they're
original
smarter
14
than that.
didn't have that. They had this mental system where you had to pick one of like 80 wards, and then you had to go and find an NPC somebody had left in that ward, and then you had to see, does this NPC have what I'm looking for?
Yeah.
No. Move to the next NPC. Like,
to sell the stuff, you had to give stuff to your retainer.
Search.
Yeah, it's so dumb to sell stuff for people who don't know how the original system worked. You gave some merchandise to your retainer, then they stood in a major city, and you had to go talk to each one of them like they were a normal shop NPC, check their inventory, and do that for 10,000 people to find what you're looking for.
It's just absurd.
That's the most 2005 thing I've ever heard.
It's so dumb.
I'll just take my Game Link cable here and plug it into...
Like, supposedly, when Yoshida took over the game, because he had no awareness of 14 going into it. He went in basically blind because he is somebody who's very focused on whatever he's currently working on. So, like, he knew it was a thing, but he had no familiarity with it. So, one of the stories says when he took over, he asked, "Okay, can you show me the forums? Can I see the stuff?" And they basically told him, "Yeah, we have no feedback mechanism for our fans to give us any kind of issues." And he just kind of stared at them. Like, are you serious? Okay, that's where we're starting. And that's when he started doing weekly informational directives, or informational directs, where he would put out a public statement going, "This is what we're working on. These are the issues we see. These are the bugs. This is where we're at. Please let me know how this is going for you guys. Give us feedback. We now have forums." He was very, very hands-on in the community himself. Not just like community managers give him information or anything. Like, he was very active in getting this information, telling people, okay, this is an issue. Here's how we're going to fix it. Like, he very much felt that communication was a huge part of what 14 had lacked.
He is the community.
And it's also worth pointing out that not only did they go away and decide this incredibly crazy plan for a multi-million-dollar company to go away and rebuild the entire game in a year or two. I think it's like however long it was.
It was 3 years, but during those 3 years, they were also still doing fixes for the original, so they were splitting resources.
Yeah, so they also committed to, we have a player base. We can't just go away in a black box and build a new game. We need to support and fix the current game at the same time, which is an insane proposition.
Yep. Also, sorry, you guys can go.
Oh no, I said, look who you're talking about, though. I mean, Yoshi P being like, "Yep, and you're gonna do it," and just shrugging and walking away.
Also, they got rid of the subscription model for until basically he went, "We are not charging anyone the monthly subscription until this game is a fucking game." And I think the first year after he took over, there were no subscriptions. They did not add subscriptions in until they had dungeons, until they had party fixed, until they had the bugs fixed and the basic components that should have been there in the beginning. And then he went, okay, that was when he announced, I don't know if he had announced before that. I think this is when they announced that they were going to be doing the relaunch, and basically went, okay, we're putting subscriptions back in to fund the relaunch, where we're going to be rebuilding this from the ground up. And at that point, he'd gained enough. He'd gained enough trust in the community that nobody had an issue.
Yeah, they were also so sorry to the legacy players that to this day those players are grandfathered into a cheaper subscription.
Mm-hmm. And every so often the legacy players will get some extra items.
Which
Like-
I think is dope, because that's
Yeah.
a really good way of that's a really good way of being like, you've been with us since the beginning. Thank you.
So eventually what happened was it sounds like they'd fixed the game, or at least done enough to the point where they did shut it down in November 2012. And it was off until late August 2013. So they took about 9 months while it was down, and they put it in a cocoon, and it reemerged as a beautiful butterfly.
Well, I prefer to say they tossed the moon down like Final Fantasy VII's meteor, and then from the ashes arose a new world. A world reborn.
They literally
Wow.
in lore destroyed the world, which was fucking cool.
They crashed the moon into the world during a massive final battle between the characters, and your character, the Warrior of Light, if you're a legacy one, literally gets saved from the moon crashing by the old mage dude, who we'll talk about later. Yes, I do know his actual name.
Who played the Song of Time and rewound it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he didn't
Wow.
rewind it. He threw you forward so you wouldn't die, and then you awaken outside of one of the capital cities in A Realm Reborn.
Where you have to feed a sick Cid some fish in order to keep him alive, and then go out and try to find the others to get rid of Kefka. Oh wait, wrong game.
All of its backstory is in the Silmarillion. You can look it up.
Well, let's see. We have an amnesiac Cid in this. We fight Kefka. It's basically Final Fantasy VI.
So
Final Fantasy VI confirmed.
So that was a very nice way of actually taking the first half hour here and giving me the backstory here, the one who has not played a second of Final Fantasy XIV. So it reemerged in August 2013 as A Realm Reborn, and it was almost, at least as far as the reception was concerned, almost a complete 180 from the original release. Like it was acclaimed, it was praised, people showered Square with praise again.
It also kept, most importantly, and I don't know how many people are actually aware of this, it literally kept Square Enix from declaring bankruptcy.
I didn't realize that part.
Yeah, me neither.
Final Fantasy XIV twice kept Square, but once kept them completely out of bankruptcy, but twice, there are two very bad points in time between rather large releases that had to be pushed back, that Square Enix did not have the money to do what they needed to do, and the only reason they were able to keep themselves afloat was off of Final Fantasy XIV.
What amuses me about 14 is we all know as fans that Square has an abysmal history at how long they take to develop things. Like the 7 remake, 15, they all have development periods.
Kingdom Hearts 3, what?
Kingdom Hearts, yeah, they're all ridiculous. 14 has none of that. The development team has a consistent schedule. They release patches every 3.5 months-ish. They release expansions every 2 years, basically on the dot.
They have built this very, very well-tuned, well-oiled machine to continuously pump this out. And there are times where they've gone, there are things they want to do, and they've literally said the reason we haven't done this yet is because we have not been able to work it into the schedule, and we're not pushing stuff back.
Yeah, and this is where I come to the project management discussion, is that they've designed a very efficient way that players get consistently delivered updates. You know how often they're going to come. You know what kind of quality they're going to be. They have a rhythm, and it just keeps people engaged all the time. Like the actual story, which is odd for an MMO in that it's one linear story through the expansions. Like, you can start WoW and basically jump to the current expansion and not have a clue what's going on in the world. But with 14, you have to continue this story from the beginning, which has its own usability problems. But for me, it means that I now basically have a Final Fantasy TV show. I know every 3 months that I get new episodes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a great... I never thought of it that way. That is a great example. I will mention one thing, though, from you when you mentioning the usability issues. This ties right back to the original Final Fantasy XIV with how they listened to the community and fixed things, because they went, we have some issues with pacing in the original Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn. So what are they doing? They are redoing all of the quests, and we're going to be getting a drop where they fix a bunch of this and make it far easier to get into for newer players.
Oh yeah, something like 13% of the quests in ARR are going to be gone and replaced by just text boxes or whatever.
Yeah, there was that live updates. They're still doing them. He shows up, he tells you what's going on in development, and this most recent one was yesterday.
I haven't seen it yet, so
I think it was Friday.
But he's saying they cut 13% of the quests. Some of the other quests that were, the annoying filler quests, they've shortened them. And this is all based on, they know that part of the game is kind of a slog, because it's been out there for years at this point, and they're going back to fix 5-year-old content.
What one thing you have to remember is they did this mad rebuild of the game, and then they then had to support it immediately, which meant that some of the very initial patches after A Realm Reborn launched, they're not great, because you've got an exhausted development team that has to keep churning out content while fixing the things they hadn't quite finished. So yeah, they're cutting a lot of that content, which is just a bit of a slog now, because the game has 6 years of bloody content to go through.
And I was going to say that because, if I'm going to be jumping into this game for the first time, there have been players who have been here from the beginning, not just from the original game, but also from when A Realm Reborn came out. Again, 6 years, and, if Square is still sticking to its monthly subscription, I don't know if I'd be inclined to keep playing it knowing that I have 7 years almost of content to go through, and it's a massive slog to start.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad they're finally going to be touching on it, because now one thing I will bring up, because we mentioned the story. Final Fantasy XIV as a whole has probably my favorite story in a Final Fantasy game. If people ask me what my favorite Final Fantasy is, 14 is my answer right now.
100% agreement.
Yeah. So, but the weakest of the game, of the stories, is A Realm Reborn, the original. So I'm really glad they're going and touching it up, because it has a lot of potential. It has a lot of good things in there, but they hadn't found their identity yet. And I really feel like they came into their own during Heavensward, which is the first expansion, widely considered the best story that they've told. Shadowbringers has rivaled it, but that was them really finding their niche and excelling in it, and it feels like they're taking a lot of that and bringing it back into A Realm Reborn now.
And maybe this will be a fight later, but I think Shadowbringers is the best they've put out so far. Obviously, Heavensward is still great. It's great that they're going back to streamline this stuff, because now, in my opinion, the content's just gotten better as they've gone. And it builds up to this tremendous story, and they're still making callbacks to things that have happened 6 years ago, and it's like, oh my god, it's that guy again. And I'm just hyped that more people are going to be able to get through that without having to deal with some of their more outdated design decisions.
Yeah, I would agree with you. For me, I feel like Shadowbringers is better throughout, but I feel like Heavensward has the best crap, why can't I remember the word from set piece moments.
Yeah.
Say Heavensward just has some of the best big epic moments in the entire game, in all of the expansions.
The story I love, by the way, just as a side note, that there's no Stormblood defenders. The poor most average of expansions.
I'm gonna just put my hand up here and just throw myself in this ring. I am
okay.
100% a Stormblood. Stormblood, I would say is easily. Well, this is my second favorite after Shadowbringers. Shadowbringers knocked it out of the goddamn park. But yeah, Stormblood to me was my favorite, and where I got all of the major payoff that I wanted, especially for the Eorzea versus Garlemald story, which is why I'm invested,
Yeah, I think that the major criticism of Stormblood is how they split the story across two different locations, and you kind of jump back and forth, which ruins the pacing a bit.
Yeah, sorry, you go.
No, I would throw the hat for the Shadowbringers, and Heavensward following it is my personal opinion. I did want to say that, and this is coming from somebody who fucking loves the story, it does have its downsides and its weak points. One of them is some people have incredible fucking plot armor, and some characters are killed and then just brought back for seemingly no reason.
Oh yeah.
But yeah,
JRPG
overall,
tropes are a thing.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it is a fucking... Especially when you compare it to some of... where I think Square have lost their way a bit with storytelling is in some of the newer games. I mean, 15 is the perfect example where it was just never finished. But where you play something like 15 or Kingdom Hearts, and it's just a bit incomprehensible, and you're like, okay, I was following the story for half of this, and then it just kind of went mental for no reason. 14's story is incredibly grounded while being in a fantasy world, in political intrigue and all these different nations fighting against each other.
One thing I'll say for the defense of Stormblood is, I feel like why Shadowbringers is generally regarded as the best. Stormblood knocked it out of the park with characters, and Heavensward knocked it out of the park with plot, and Shadowbringers kind of did both, kind of melded them together, and that's why most people will say Shadowbringers is the best, but then there's an argument over the next.
Yeah, that's actually really okay. That's actually a pretty reasonable way to put it.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, we got two or three of the best villains in Stormblood. We got a beloved character in Hien. We got we just over and over we kept getting all of these great characters. We just didn't get a plot to support them.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see where you're coming from there. I would definitely say that the amount of husbandos increased precipitously because what's the name of the second one? The second expansion. Sorry, my brain just died.
Heavensward?
Thank you. Sorry, my brain literally just died. But in Heavensward, we had a husbando, and we saw how that went. So Well, technically we had two, I guess.
We got two. We had Emmerich.
Yeah, we did have Emmerich, but the other one, the one that we were really in love with, and then, oh no. But anyway, so...
Emmerich the rebound.
For Brian, who's not played this, what he's talking about is characters died.
Yeah,
I mean, I appreciate the fact that you're not spoiling a bit of the story, because I mean, you could so easily, and you still could, go completely off the rails, and I will just lose you entirely. Just be like, ha.
I mean, in context, right? One of the things I think is the major strength of Final Fantasy over, say, WoW, at least right this moment, is that the character work is amazing. And so what you have is at this point, the main game and 3 expansions worth of time you've spent with these characters. You've gone through these struggles. You've returned the fucking amount that you could ever return. And so when things happen to these characters, you feel it. Unlike when things happen to Sylvanas, and I was just like, okay, I don't care.
To touch on that, I also played WoW, I want to say for maybe just shy of 2 years. I couldn't tell you a single plot point from anything that happened in that game if you asked me.
See, I played WoW for the plot, so I could relate quite a bit of it. It just isn't as good.
Nah, dude, with a gun to my head, I could mention minor plots, but not a major.
I've had very little experience with WoW, so I'd probably just ask for contrast. How is the story done in WoW? Like, is it just quest text boxes? Are there cutscenes? I don't really understand that part.
Okay, so it depends on how far we're going in WoW. In original WoW, it was basically just quests. As the game progressed, you would have main scenario stuff, which would occasionally have a cutscene, but it did not have as driving a plot as 14 does. Somebody else can correct me on how it's gone forward, because I never played past Wrath of the Lich King.
Nah, it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
It's pretty much still there.
So that's the major thing, because 14 plays a lot like WoW does, but how it tells its story is completely differently. Like, the way I've always put it to my friends when I'm selling them on this is, it does not have a story like an MMO. It tells a story like a single player Final Fantasy that happens to have multiple players.
Which is very, very interesting for me, because I am not new to the Final Fantasy series. I've played all the numbered games. So, my biggest criticism was that especially for 13, was that the story and much of the gameplay in 13 did not feel like a Final Fantasy game. It's a similar criticism to you, Ronny, when you were talking about Resident Evil 4. It doesn't feel like a Resident Evil game to you.
Yeah, so, we were talking about that during that podcast, and it's a perfect analogy.
And, I understood that criticism. For once, I actually could see a contrary point you were making.
For once.
And, I'm like, oh, I understand that criticism. So, hearing all of you looking at the story of Final Fantasy XIV that I know nothing about, and having it, and you praising it, this feels like a Final Fantasy story. And for Ronny to say that this game has his favorite Final Fantasy story, that right there is going to persuade me to give me a look at this. And, we haven't even touched on things like the gameplay mechanics or the game economy or anything else that, may have been taken or influenced from older Final Fantasy games, or something completely new ideas.
Now, obviously, the rest of us have found something we love about the game that's keeping us playing it. But for you, if you're not into that monthly model, it's probably still worth it for you to drop the money. You can buy the game and all the expansions as one package and just play through the story and then just unsubscribe when you're done if that's how you feel about it. But I think you'd enjoy it.
I will say, Brian, as I'm sorry, I don't actually know what your name is because I wasn't here at the beginning to get your introduction. Washburn?
Andrew, nice to meet you.
There we go. Nice to meet you. I'm Ronny. I think you caught on that. But I lost my train of thought. What were you just saying? What was I responding to you on?
I was suggesting
why we played. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll say, Brian, I've stopped taking breaks from the game 3 times after I've caught up to stuff. So it is absolutely possible to go, I'm just playing this for the plot. I'm going to catch up, and then I'm going to not play for a year, and then I'll come back for a month and play through all the new stuff. Or even just come back for each expansion and just play through all the plot and then take 2 years off.
I guess as a contrary example to that, although even the developers highly encourage that kind of gameplay if you want to do it that way, is that I went into 14 as not an MMO player, as somebody who really did not like MMOs, and 14 made me an MMO player.
You yourself, Joshi, has sent that, that exact point, and yet you have sank how many hours into it? Over 1,000?
Yeah, thousands of hours. It's ridiculous.
I'm going to pull mine up right now because I'm curious at what it's going to tell me.
I honestly forgot we could do that. What's the command?
It's /playtime. Mine says 77 days.
All right.
Oh, I'm just looking at the playtime on my Steam account.
That's what I'm going to do, because if I open up the game right now, you guys are all going to hear it because of how my computer audio works.
So I'm going to admit right now, I've been grinding materials the entire time we've recorded this podcast.
I thought about doing that.
I wonder if we were allowed to do that.
That is very fitting for this podcast.
Oh, congratulations, we have now gone meta. DLC has become meta. We did it, everybody.
Okay, we're all set now. We shut it down. It down.
It's over. After 10 years, we have reached the zenith.
I got those low numbers. I need to pump these numbers up. I only have 995 hours. I haven't even hit 4 digits.
Oh, wow. That's less than me. Holy shit, I thought I was going to be the newbie.
And I've been
2,000 hours in.
And I have literally been playing since day 1 release of A Realm Reborn.
So I just did the conversion. 77 days is 1,848 hours.
Wait,
yeah.
How do you have less than me? Hold on.
Skill? Talent.
I was going to say pure unadulterated talent.
I have 1,868 hours in the game.
Nice.
You don't have to beat the boss if you beat him on the first try.
I guess so. It's probably right.
So we've been general. Do we want to start moving through, talking about A Realm Reborn specifics and then moving through the expansions?
I think that's probably a good idea.
Sure.
So, because I missed the very beginning of this, did we even give the framing device for what you are and what you're doing?
No, we've not discussed what the game is in any way.
No, we were just discussing sort of the history.
Yeah.
And then
So you start this game speaking to a giant crystal, how every Final Fantasy should start.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I'm like, wait a minute, I've started this before.
Yeah, telling you that you are the warrior of light, and that you need to fix things. And then you wake up outside of a capital city, not remembering most of your past, which is not uncommon. When the moon fell, the survivors all had memory issues of what had occurred. So when you say you have memory issues, people just assume it's because of that. And you go on to become the great hero, as you rightfully should in a Final Fantasy game.
It was Sin's funny toxin.
Yes.
damn it, Sin. Why you gotta be ruining everything?
So that's basically your framing device. It's you wake up, you're given a Switch slate, and wrong game.
Close enough. Close enough. You wake up, you talk to the giant crystal who's called Heidelin, and you go on, and you must stop several threats as you're going on. But in A Realm Reborn, you are dealing with 3 threats primarily. One is the Empire, which has invaded the continent that you're on.
How do you
2, you have to deal with the threat of the primals, which are these gods made from worship and ideas that are the classic Final Fantasy summon. Or most of them. And then 3rd, the villain in the background are the Asians, black-cloaked immortal beings who are manipulating the world from behind the scenes.
The guys from Kingdom Hearts.
Yes. Organization 13.
In fairness,
No.
some of them have white cloaks.
Point. One does.
That's Saruman.
Yes. It's Organization 13 and Saruman. Yes.
Nobody likes Elidibus. Literally no one. That's why they made him wear the different color cloak. They were like, no. You don't get
to join our club.
Yeah.
The Asians are the long arc villains of the series. They play a role in all of the expansions. And the Empire comes in and out. But those are the characters that you will be seeing popping through all these expansions in different forms.
I just want to bring up a point, Ronnie. We only have Joshi for what, another hour? So,
Yeah, just about.
So.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't know. Once again, I missed the beginning.
Yeah, that's why I'm letting you know now. So, we're gonna try to keep the thesis presentation and the dissertation to a minimum.
All right, I got this shit. I'm going to do this shit quick, fast. All right. Okay. So, ARR, punch primals in the face, look at Asians, scare them a bit. Damn it, Heavensward, punch more Asians, look at dragons. Dragons are cool. Yeah. Stormblood, war. And
Also,
then
Little Sun.
Shadowbringers. Oh, also Little Sun. Yes, Little Sun is important. And Shadowbringers is, where the fuck am I and why? Why am I here? Oh, I gotta punch that thing. There you go.
All right. Well, if you have any questions, thoughts, comments on this episode or any other, but yeah, just wanted to let you know, Ronnie. So
No, but let's get into AR. This is actually really interesting.
So I just want to jump in with my hours. 3,282.
oh,
Wow. We have a
Yep.
new champion.
Yeah.
Mental.
I expected y'all. I honestly did expect all y'all to be about there, but
I was gonna say my wife probably matches that, but she's not on the podcast.
So I'm curious, what do people main and what are your character races?
Okay.
oh, y'all can go first. I'm just
Okay. I was gonna say I main a female Makote because I am basic as heck,
Nice.
and anybody who knows me knows that's what I would have been playing.
That's a cat person for
Yes.
Brian.
The Makote are the cat people.
Oh, not surprised at all.
Yeah, Brian knows, and then I made a very... okay, first of all, before we go any farther, for Brian on this, one of the unique things in this is that you don't just choose a class, you can switch between any of them. So you start with one, but you can unlock all of them. So
That almost
I
sounds
made
like Final Fantasy V's job system.
it
It
is
is.
Practically is,
Yeah.
yes.
It just straight up is. They just did the job system. You just switch between the different ones. So
Nice.
I made a very pragmatic choice when I started the game. I chose to start as an Arcanist so that I would get both Summoner and Scholar and have both a healer and DPS without having to level them separately. So I main Summoner if I have to choose one, but Both of those are my mains, and I also have a level capped Dark Knight as my tank.
Nice.
My main bounces sort of back and forth in my mind between my warrior and my gunbreaker. I like tanking roles. So I will almost always be the tank if I can squeeze it in. And I play a Rogadin, which Rogadin are basically big, like beef, basically the beefcake race.
Beefcakes.
You're a beefy human, basically.
Yeah. To give you a D&D example that might correspond, they'd be the Goliaths.
They're thick with 3 C's.
Yeah, they're real thick.
Shan smash.
Well, yeah, and
They're like 10 feet tall and built like a brick shit house.
yeah. Do you know the Goliaths in D&D? Because yeah, they're basically those.
I do, yes.
Okay.
For some extra con.
I've played enough D&D to get that.
As a note, speaking of D&D and Final Fantasy, there is a fan-made D&D Final Fantasy XIV conversion to D&D.
Of course so.
And they converted many, if not all, of the jobs.
They did, and it's excellent.
Yep.
That's cool. So I play a Lalafell, which is like a dwarf child race. You never want to pick it if you care about glamour,
Facts.
because you can't see any of it. And I'm a white mage because I play healers in basically every video game.
Okay, wait. If you play a Lalafell, like a third of the glamours don't work for you, but the other 2/3 look better on you than every other race.
Yes,
so it's a give and take.
Hats are really good on Lalafells because they're the most thing you can see.
So
If you like
your character model.
I'll say if you. Sorry,
Josh, I've seen you post pictures of your character, and I'm like, oh, what a cute little thing. I'm like, and I look at it, and I'm like, I don't know what that race is, but it just looks like the Annabelle of Final Fantasy XIV.
Pretty much.
If you like hats, don't play a Hrothgar.
No.
Oh yeah, that's depressing.
The two new races that were introduced in Shadowbringers, Viera and Hrothgar, both have unique heads, which means none of the or most of the current headgear does not work with them, so it just doesn't show up on their models.
Wait a minute. Do you mean to tell me that Square Enix took a name from Beowulf and made a race out of it?
They're lion people.
Yep.
They're big old
also
kitty cats.
That's another thing that we didn't actually mention that's actually important to the understanding of both the success of A Realm Reborn and the franchise of Final Fantasy XIV as it is. They have stolen from literally every possible Final Fantasy game.
Oh yeah.
They have done crossovers. And they have done crossovers from every single Final Fantasy game they can get their hands on. The latest that I remember was Final Fantasy XV, where you got the car. Like, you straight up got their, like, road car, and it's a 4-person mount. And everybody I knew who had, like, stepped away from the game had come back for however long it took to grind up to get that car.
Yeah. It's this weird contrast between 14 is very much a game in its own right. Like Ronny talked about the introduction of the story and the lore and stuff. And the lore is fucking ridiculous. There are 2 massive lore tomes you can buy. But in addition to that, it's also treated as basically a Final Fantasy theme park. Like, you can go fight Kefka, you can get the car from 15. Like, there are so many remixes of classic songs from old games.
My wife and I will take the car, the Final Fantasy 15 car, and just ride it down during serious cutscenes, or during serious places, just going, vastly inappropriate. Vastly inappropriate. But yeah, no, I mean, like, just the Stormblood's probably the best for it, with all of the alpha, beta, delta escape areas, which are all based on enemies. You fight X-Death, you fight Kefka, you fight Chaos from the original.
And like, even the bloody golden saucer from Final Fantasy VII is in this game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or like Ivalice basically being part of 14 with Final Fantasy Tactics characters showing up.
And another important note in terms of like sort of a meta understanding of sort of how Final Fantasy works. They have a lot of ad space within the game. So right now they're essentially running an ad for what's that game? With the blind lady with the 2B. Yeah. Nier Automata. Yeah, Nier Automata. Because why not? I mean, you can do that. They run promotions for different Japanese game shows. In the American version, they're just like, well, it's here. Here you go.
Well, even going beyond just as, advertising for Nier, they brought on the director of that game, right? Taro Yoko, or I don't know his actual name. Yoko, check it backwards. And he was there and helped them design this raid. And there's going to be 2 more updates to that as they go forward. They just...
Yep. And they brought in the original director for Tactics to give advice on that raid. They had the crossover with frickin' Yokai Watch.
Yep.
We don't talk about that.
I liked it, and they brought it back twice. And do you know why they brought it back? Do you know that story?
The Japanese really like it?
No. So they did it the first time. Then later, Yoshida, during one of his things, he did a stream with the director of Yokai Watch. And they were talking about doing the thing and how fun it was and the rest of it. And then the director of Yokai Watch went, yeah, I never was able to get all of the monsters in it because he plays 14. He's like, I wasn't able to get it before the end of it. Could you guys do it again? Wow. And Yoshida went, yeah, we'll do it again. And that's how it happened.
I'll tell you, the sperm mount is pretty cool looking.
Ugh.
Oh, there's also a Monster Hunter crossover with this crazy fight against Rathalos. That is remarkably different from the rest of the game, in that it has like the limited healing mechanic from Monster Hunter. There, you have to watch the boss's like animation behavior rather than the regular mechanics in 14, where you just kind of, there's an AoE, I should probably step out of that. There's some crazy stuff they've done.
Funny enough, they did that in the other direction too. In Monster Hunter, there's actually a Final Fantasy crossover and with Behemoth, and it's one of the hardest fights in the damn. So, yeah.
I will say I've noticed a lot of people that I play Final Fantasy with also play Monster Hunter. Like, it's probably 60%, something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
I still need to farm my Rathalos mount.
Yeah, I haven't. I did a lot of that fight, but I haven't brought myself to get enough of the mount, which does make me sad.
That is my hobby in the game. I'm collecting all of the mounts. I have a spreadsheet with all of them and how to get each of them.
Nerd!
Well, that means you're going to have to do Savage.
I know it means I have to do Savage. I currently have all of the non-unavailable PvP mounts. I have over half of all the mounts in the game right now.
I like how you classify that non-PvP, because PvP is not a thing that exists in this game.
No. I have
as far as we're concerned. Oh, you do have them.
No, that's what I meant if I said it wrong. No, I have all of the ones that are still available in PvP.
Oh, I feel sorry for you.
No, I hate PvP too. I hate it with a passion in every game.
If there's one thing that is categorically bad about 14, it's the PvP modes.
funny enough,
I don't know.
I can. Oh, sorry.
No, you go first. I talk a lot.
I was gonna say one of the things that I honestly have to say, I think that to me, the PvP being as considered as bad as it is considered, to me is a saving grace, because there's a lot of games that when their PvP is considered like good, they start balancing everything around the PvP, and then it's just not fun anymore. I think a lot of that is what happened with WoW.
Well, the fact that that all of your abilities are like each ability has a PvP version and a regular version, and the PvP version has no effect on the regular. So PvP is balanced entirely on its own.
Which I kind of like, actually. That sounds like it's a good mechanic, because
like from doing all the PvP, there are good and bad things about it. Like, I like some of the modes better than the ones that were in WoW. I can't comment on any other games because that's the only MMO PvP I've done outside of this. But it seems like the more interesting modes are the ones that take longer, so nobody wants to do them, like Rival Wings, where you get freaking mecha that you ride.
I mean, the modes, the concept behind the modes are often like very interesting sounding. I've just never enjoyed actually playing it.
That's how I feel about all PvP. I didn't know if that was just me.
Funnily enough, the only time I ever really PvP'd for any length of time in 14 was in A Realm Reborn, and I had like crazy overgeared level 40 stuff to do the level 40 PvP instead of the level 50 stuff, because it was kind of set up the same way WoW was, where the people who sunk the most time into it had the best gear and therefore always won. And I haven't touched any of these new modes since then. It's been 5 years, you know?
So we touched on the PvP generally being considered bad. There are a couple things that I think most people would go, even if they weren't entirely bad, were at least duds in 14, such as the Diadem or Eureka.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody I know who's done it was like, wow, I'm going to tear my goddamn head.
Yeah. For our viewers and Brian, Eureka is basically a throwback mode to classic MMOs, like pre-World of Warcraft MMOs, where there was no party finder at the beginning. You just had to go find people. It was a hardcore grind. There was almost no questing. It was just hunting rare monsters in groups that you couldn't kill alone. And then the dungeon at the end required 40 people for it. You couldn't queue into it, so you had to find 40 people in chat together to go through it. And you had to split into multiple groups to do different parts of the instance. And if one of the groups died, the other one fails, no matter how well they were doing. And if you die, you're kicked out of the instance.
And don't forget the worst part, de-leveling, which is a horrific concept.
Yeah. Luckily, this is no longer required content. It is not required for the story. It is literally just to the side if it's something you care to do. So,
Well,
yeah.
Relic weapons. Well, some of the prettiest weapons are locked. Well, prettiest weapons and armors are locked behind that mode. But from everything I hear, they're going to try to find a different way to make those available, because they got a lot of negative feedback.
I didn't hear they were trying to find another way to make them available. I heard they were going to be trying to fix Eureka. So,
also that.
Make it not terrible. But
Well,
I mean,
so the
I would
way
argue the realm. You go.
The way they're handling it in Shadowbringers is the new one that they talked about yesterday. Is they claim the content is very different, although we'll wait and see about that. But it's an optional path. There are alternate ways to do it that don't involve doing that content.
Okay, that sounds cool. So, like, you have more than one way to get to the same relic weapon?
Yeah, so there's a mandatory story involved, but you have optional paths for how you approach the grindy content, and that's what relic weapons are always supposed to be, really, is they are cool things you can get, but they're incredibly grindy.
Yeah. So for example, you need this many massive earth crystals. You could get massive earth crystals from doing dungeons or from doing fates or from doing whatever. Like, there's more than one way to get the thing you need to progress.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really... Like I said, I have not watched the most recent one yet, so I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I mean, it is the perfect example of what we touched on earlier, where they listen to feedback and they change the new content going forward. So they've had negative opinions about this content in the past, and they're trying to rethink it and see how they can do it differently to make people more happier.
So how about how good crafting and gathering is in this game?
Before you continue with that point, I would like to break the first half at this point.
No.
Yes.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Just edit halfway through one of his sentences.
It's going to get to that point. I'm just going to cut to break. I'm just going to put music in there. And like, what the hell happened? I cut you off, you jerk.
What are you talking about? No, what's actually going to happen is I'm going to start talking. Everyone's going to leave. You're going to take a break, and you're going to come back, and I'll still be talking. I'll be on the same point.
Yep. So,
Like, wait, what the hell were you talking about?
like, we all just, had to go to the bathroom, and he's still going on. So, because, yes, we only have Joshy for a limited time, so I want to cut to break and then start the second half with your crafting stuff, because this is all very good. You guys are doing a very good job trying to sell me on this game, by the way. So, I'm eager to hear more, especially when you go feel more into the expansions, which will be in the second half. So while we're away, you'll have some music. Ronny will just ramble to no one in particular. And yeah, he'll do that. I mean, so we are talking Final Fantasy XIV on downloadable content. We'll see you on the other side of the break. We'll be back.